Right, okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Student Council. I'd just like to, as usual, remind everyone that Student Council is live streamed and recorded and later uploaded. And just to remind you, as you always are, to be lovely and considerate to one another. Just a few notices today. First of all, don't forget to vote next week. We've got student elections. I can see several candidates around the room. You vote just online on the NUSU website. It should be obvious. And today, just when you're getting food from the back of the room, please use gloves. We've just had on the screen at the start of council an update from the government, who are moving from a containment strategy to a delay strategy. And so the advice for that is as follows. From tomorrow, if you are experiencing any or all of the symptoms associated with the coronavirus, please stay home. Everybody should be washing your hands, although we should all probably be doing that anyway. Please remain updated by, please follow updates by the government. These can be found on the NHS website. They'll also be on the BBC. Please follow those out. Please follow those sources of information and don't promote other less useful sources of information that could be out there. This advice goes for, the stay home advice goes for households that only include one symptomatic person. So if anyone in your household is forced to self-isolate, you should also follow that advice. The final point is please do not panic. Remain calm. The symptoms of the virus include a cough, a high temperature, and difficulty breathing. Numbers you can call are, of course, 111 and 999 if you think it's an emergency where someone's life is in danger. And, of course, you can also find much of the information you'll find on 111 on the NHS website. Finally, yes, just wash your hands, stay calm, and look after each other. Spread information and calm, not the virus or panic. So that's all from notices. Minutes of the previous council. Any corrections may have been raised before council. I'm not aware of any corrections to the minutes, and so they are deemed passed. The steering committee report. This was not submitted to this council, but the scrutiny and disciplinary committee reports have been submitted and were sent out to council members before council. Oh, sorry, yes, it was the steering committee was submitted. The scrutiny committee report wasn't submitted. So yes, sorry, clarification. The scrutiny committee report was not submitted, but the steering committee and the disciplinary reports were submitted and have been circulated prior to council. They should have been emailed out to you, or they're available on the NUSU website. I've received no corrections to them, and so they are also deemed passed. I would say let's move on to the State of the Union report, but unfortunately our illustrious president isn't quite here yet, so we're just going to go to questions and mandates to the liberation officers and NUSU chairs. If they could come up to the front now, and Pablo, if you could take over the chair.
All right. So, does anyone have a question for this lovely bunch?
It's not really a question, just a well done for all your recent campaigns. You've absolutely smashed it. They were really, really good. You should be really proud. And good luck to anyone running.
Anyone else? All right.
All right.
Right, okay, so just until Katie's able to arrive, we're just going to move on to the open debate section. You'll have noticed in this student council the open debate has been moved from the end of council to the middle. That is just because, A, we don't have very many motions in this council, but also it's often right at the end and often gets axed because people can't be bothered with it because it's after all the motions and some of the important bits. So our motion tonight is as a result of the survey that was sent round at the last student council, where a lot of respondents essentially replied that they found that student council wasn't particularly transparent. And so our debate tonight is on that transparency, and the motion is 2/3 of council members voted student council is not transparent enough. How could we improve on this? So I'd just like to invite anybody in Student Council to voice any concerns or any ideas they have for improving Council to Council, so that they can be minuted, just so that we can consider ideas for possible future motions to make Council better. I think I've heard several suggestions from people outside of Council, but if anyone would like to kick us off, Elizabeth.
So one thing I've noticed since joining student council is that the only people who really seem to know or care what happens during student council are people who are on it, as well as some people for like part of society committees or sports committees that may have some involvement with the union. But when it comes to the average student here at Newcastle University, they don't know much about what sorts of decisions are being made at student council or how they could interact or suggest something to the student union. I'm not really sure how we could make people outside of student council more aware of the decisions being made and the issues talked about and what's going on, but I think that's sort of a problem just because there are lots of students who have concerns about things or just ideas who may not know how to voice that or who they could talk to about it, or even that it's an option.
Thank you for that feedback. I think it's really difficult. We do publish student council as much as we can. It's always on emails, it's always sort of around the building. What I would say is we have got our NUSU survey out at the moment, so it may be that something comes out from that on ways that students want to hear more from us. We're kind of always looking at ways in which we can improve, but I think there's obviously so much going on in students' lives that there's only so many emails that you can send out at any one time, but thank you for that feedback. I think we'll definitely look into that.
Does anybody else have?
Yeah, I don't think that another email would be helpful even if you wanted to do that. I think what might be helpful is if you told all the staff members and lecturers when student council is on, and they could just do like a 10-second reminder in their lecture saying, just a reminder, in 7 days it's student council again. Just check your email to know what's being talked about there.
Any further suggestions?
I've always thought that obviously the emails are sort of a way of getting the word out things, but most people who are at the university tend to engage, and we see this through elections. We post like videos and things onto the student union Facebook page. I think if you engage more on social media, say what's happening in our union, what motions are going through, what's the attitude, what's going on, things like this. And I know there might be things like that at the moment, but they don't seem to be very widespread. And I think if more people just saw in passing on social media, this is what's happening, this is what's being discussed, then people might be more engaged with it.
We do that already. I think there's a lot of traffic on social media. Like, we have so much to post about. And I mean, I post like three times a day sometimes. Everyone does. Our NUSU channel posts quite a lot. I mean, Dan can vouch for that. But it's hard because, you know, we try and increase these things and there's still no engagement with what's going on. Check out the latest. We upload everything online and then link it through our social media page. So I don't really know how to go from there.
It's just sort of working out when the best time to post and what we post. It's kind of a constant thing that we're always looking at. But maybe more videos. Do we share the NUTV?
Yeah.
Through the
Sure, NUTV and NUSU and Your Voice all post about student council and with one or two of the motions that steering decides to promote.
I admit maybe I could do more like on my personal sub page. Maybe that's going to help.
Obviously sharing the NUTV stuff is a fair point, but people aren't really going to want to sit through like a big 2-hour-long live stream, perhaps a wacky highlight reel, you know, the thrills and spills of the student council. Something shorter, more digestible would be a bit more appropriate. A very long, very drab, grey video isn't often the best solution to get people more interested, especially considering we already do that now, so clearly that hadn't actually worked.
Yeah, I think just to refocus the debate ever so slightly. all of these things would bring more people to student council, but the actual transparency of student council is what the survey question I was referring to. Can anyone think of anything that would... Sorry? I can't hear you. Okay. Georgia.
Transparent voting records or attendance records, I guess, would be two options.
But equally, I think there is still the point of like making sure the stuff reaches people. Like I think that even if we like, there's no point in us making these attendance lists if they become just like the videos and no one looks at them, because it's just more work for them, the subs to put out and people not look at.
Transparent voting records have come before council several times and they've always been rejected. What do people think of transparent voting records? That's biased.
I don't think transparent voting records are actually going to increase any transparency. We all have all training as PTOs, as SABs. We are elected to represent the student body, and they've put that trust within us. So we're elected to do our jobs. We do our jobs. Like, it's not really very democratic if we're like, oh, what did you vote for this on this motion and this motion? Like, attendance records, I agree with, and publishing attendance records would, I think, increase transparency.
Elizabeth B.
Personally, I think that a transparent voting record would be helpful simply so that people would be informed of who voted for what and what the totals were. I mean, whether or not it would be some sort of huge benefit, I don't know, but I think it would just be nice to know and to have, and since we already have the data, I don't see any problem with publishing it.
I think it's just, for me, it's a matter of confidence though, because some people might, if for example, you were friends with someone who were doing a motion, but you didn't particularly agree with it, but you didn't want to cause a dispute, then how does that work? Because it would be creating tension between people, and then voting then might not be accurate to actually what you want to do. It's a bit like politics, because if your whole family was voting Labour and you wanted to vote Tory, then what would happen? You would, if they knew that you voted Tory, that, do you know what I mean? So I just worry a little bit about people's actual confidence in them going forward with their own decisions.
Chris Winter.
Well, their own decisions shouldn't be part of it. It's the group they're representing, and also, you know, to save face then doesn't make us more democratic or transparent. It makes us more like nepotistic
What about
and
the
less.
people that aren't in a position of representation? Are we talking about everyone, or are we talking about?
Well, it depends. You know, it depends how far you want to go with it. If people, you know, how would you keep record of every single person, considering not everyone comes every week? But we know who comes every week, the SABs and the PTOs and the people in those permanent voting places. But if you keep their voting record secret, well, yeah, okay, maybe, you know, it won't look as bad on them to try and save face. But every, you know, actual democratic body that exists will often publish their voting record. Their own parliament does. You know, I don't see why I shouldn't here.
At the back there.
I would like to say that there's no benefit of increasing the level of scrutiny unless people don't know the importance of the union. We should increase the level of awareness in the student body about the union at first.
Pablo?
I think that making that voting available for some students will actually make that a lot of people abstain from voting in a lot of motions because literally they won't want to vote. And also, it's also the fact that what to do with the data, who can see it, for what period of time, like so how many times would that be available? Like a lot of people might be concerned like, oh, I'm not gonna come to council because if I vote on this and like 15 years later this becomes something that is not acceptable or the context of society changes, then it'll be recorded there.
Rabia.
I get the idea of like the pros of like holding the people you voted in to accountability, and like if you didn't vote for something, people might think, you know, it might be a way to hold people to account. But I also think even though we are voted to represent our body, the student body, we have a right to have our opinions be anonymous. Like our existence isn't for complete, you know, everyone can see what our thoughts are and what our votes are, and like we're already put under a lot of pressure because we are like the LGBT officer, the racial equality officer, we are like the face of a lot of students. Adding more scrutiny on top of that is just going to harm us.
Just in the back there. Yeah.
Talking about increasing transparency, I was wondering whether, including school reps into this conversation might actually help in sending what is being discussed here to like the everyday student, because I don't think everyone is just connected with NUSU and all the representative work that we do as we are, obviously. So I wonder if that's something that has been considered so far.
Pablo, do you want to respond to that?
So right now from the Education Executive Committee, that is form of school reps, they're elected to Council 2, if I'm correct. So there is representation from the school reps. The question would be whether to have more representation of school reps might Council think that's appropriate.
Only.
My question would be to go further than school reps and automatically invite course reps. So I don't know the exact numbers, but I imagine there's quite a few hundred of course reps across the entire university.
1,400.
Well, that's quite a lot.
Point of information.
And 6, actually.
Yeah, that would take quite a massive expansion of student council, but if that's something that we can feasibly do, and if it's something that doesn't directly impact the way the council works and the way that we have these discussions, I mean, 1,000 people are not going to come to student council. But
They could. They could. Yeah, they could. That's the problem. Where do we fit them?
And then you'd have to cater
You have
for
to
that
move
as
up,
well.
Stephen, and have someone else to
Sorry,
seat.
completely interrupted. Keep going.
Elias.
I'm 50-50 on publishing voting records, but just an interesting thought. What if we were, with the release of every agenda for student council, what if we were to put out a poll for students to engage with and just have an expression of their direct opinion? Maybe through that, council members could just have I don't know if this has been
There is
tried
actually a pre-voting mechanism of council. You can actually signal which way you're going to vote on every council motion on the NUSU website somewhere. You can see every motion that's going to council, and there, if you're logged in, you can upvote it or downvote it. But you can see, I think there's about 4 people that do it at almost every council. And so I see, and so when I'm checking the motions beforehand, I do see, 2 or 3 upvotes, 2 or 3 downvotes each time. Maybe that's something to consider for the future. Elizabeth?
So, with the idea of publishing votes would cause tension between people, I personally think that as adults we should have the strength and maturity to be able to have honest discussions about important issues, even with people we know who we disagree with. I think that if seeing that someone you know vote for something differently than you would vote for causes too much tension between you, and you can't handle that, like you need to be able to talk about it with people in a civilized way, because in this day and age we need to be able to have those uncomfortable conversations about things or we aren't going to get anywhere. And also, if you're worried about like people being just being influenced by someone they know, I also think that as people participating in society, we need to develop the skill to form our own opinions on things and not just copy the opinions of our friends. And that's on us. It's not on the student union to like make everything anonymous so people don't have to see anything that makes them uncomfortable.
What I want to say is, as like a response in a way to that, is when you're representing. So, for my example, I'm representing a community that I can't have the experience of everyone in my community. But say if a motion or something came forward that there were underlying, say, issues of maybe transphobia, biphobia or something, even if it was proposed by someone within the community, I wouldn't want my voting record to be published in that way, because I would vote against it, but then it's the public backlash that could potentially lead us to. Like, these voting, if you publish our voting records, where is that data going to go? It's not just going to be on the on university circles. It's going to be on a wider circle, and then that doesn't put any safeguard procedures in for us as like PTOs or even SABs.
Why didn't just the people in this room?
So I've always sort of advocated for voting records, and I've always imagined the way that it should be done realistically is, if there are people who wish to opt out of having their votes recorded in that way, then that's fine. I really do take the argument that if you are a representative you do sort of have to take the responsibility of having accountability there. But I think in terms of, there's lots of concerns about how long is the data going to be kept for, where's it going to be kept. All of that's covered by GDPR, and it would only, I think, realistically be allowed to be kept for as long as the person's in the position.
The question would then be raised, are we voting as people or are we voting as roles? Because it does have a question about integrity. You know, I represent welfare and equality, so the issues are so broad that I might then be starting to think about who am I actually representing as? Am I representing myself and who I've been elected on, or am I representing the role itself? I think that Liberation officers probably agree that there is going to be some conflict there about voting, and it probably would cause me to potentially opt out of things that I find that would be too controversial and people would scrutinise me for whatever reason. Even if I stick by my own decision, we're all then therefore in the limelight and potentially get quite a lot of harassment for that, which we've experienced in the past. I think we do get a lot of accountability for things. I can speak for a lot of the SABs. I don't know about Liberation officers, but I'm sure you all do as well. But I think we do get a lot of emails, stuff on New Fairs, everything that does call us out for things, and we are ready for that, but we're also human beings at the end of the day. And there is a point where we should also be able to vote for things and have the choice to be anonymous if we would like to, because that is a human right. So, I don't know, I just think that kind of conflicts with quite a lot of stuff I believe in. But
Miles. Could we not introduce some sort of mechanism whereby after a motion is either passed or rejected, it'll be decided whether the results are recorded as open or whether they're kept anonymous on who voted for what, similar to an amendment or something?
I think that needs to be that before the motion. It would be the option of the person to give that, in a way, a vote would be data. So we would need to ask the people first whether they want to give that data to NUSU, their vote, or not. So it would be pre-vote, I guess.
First thing, I think that if you're in an elected position, you should not be trying to avoid scrutiny because you're representing a large group of people. Instead, no matter how uncomfortable it may be, you should be welcoming scrutiny and being willing to take criticism, because otherwise it seems as if, well, like, some of the things it sounds like people are saying is, well, if I make a decision that goes against the interests of my community, I don't want them to be mad at me for doing something that hurts them.
it's more complex than that. I mean, have you ever been in a position, I just ask, that you've ever had that level of scrutiny before? Because I think it is, there's one thing saying that I think we've all become quite resilient people, but I think there's also a point where it becomes too much pressure, and I think we have to account for our mental health as well as SABs, and we do get a lot of scrutiny. There's ways of like holding us to account, of course, that's what council is for and it's meant to do. That's why we stand up and take officers' mandates and do things. But there's also, how can I remain protected when I can't even, I have to show my vote the whole time, which isn't legally done either. You know, you don't have to show your votes don't get shown on a political level. So why are we doing it?
Members of
You do if you're an MP.
If you're an MP, but I'm talking about like.
So therefore, us elected, it would be argued that we should follow the suit of the elected officials.
I don't know. I just think like
we're still students.
I don't know. I just think it's.
I think just on that point about how not wanting to show something that could affect, because you voted against something that could affect the group that you represent. Quite a lot of the issues that come up here aren't as simple as either being for or against the group that you represent. Some could hurt some people in the group you represent and be for others. So I just want to say it's not that simple.
Yeah. And then even if our information is like released and our votes are released, we don't get to go up to every student afterwards and be like, this is why I voted for this, this is my point of view. Especially if it just says, oh, Rabia Chima voted against something, like defeating racism or whatever. I don't get to, that was a really bad example. I would vote for that. But we don't get to justify it to everyone, we don't get to explain it to everyone, and people can take that and do what they will with it. And yeah, take it out of context. They won't even watch the live feed. Also, second point is, we're just coming this year and last year, one of the first years that we've actually had good engagement for people going for liberation officers and people going for SAB roles. Like, it's, you know, last year we had the most votes so far. Like, putting us under more scrutiny, that's just going to affect how much engagement there is. And wasn't that the first point that was brought up, that we want more engagement? Like, it's just, yeah.
Just in the back there, isn't that sort of the point of officers' mandate, though, that you're standing up there and not
Yeah.
scrutinised?
Yeah.
So if we get your voting records on, personally, I think we shouldn't release the voting records for everyone at council, but I think if you're elected to a role, you should be there to represent and we should be able to see, because many times we'll hear people speak for emotion, they'll say, you know what, I'm all for accessibility and this, but this is this, and then they'll go forward and backward on what they're saying, and it's hard to tell whether they're actually going for or against it. And so at the end, if we got to see what they've actually voted for, it would be good for next time at council, if someone had an issue with it, they could bring it up and say, oh, well, you said this and this, but I want to know what you think and why you voted that way, because that's sort of the point of.
Can I just ask why wouldn't that be the same to everyone then? Like, why is that not the same to all the people in council? Because you're all, but a lot of you are elected to represent in council as well. You're put forward to represent in council. You're all voting members. So why is that not considered?
And we had the same number of votes as you. We don't, like, just because we're Liberation South roles, we don't get to have like 10 points to your 1. Like,
in my opinion, I think it has to be the same across the board, because a lot of people are elected. A lot of people are exec members of different committees. Society committees, we all have a role of responsibility in elections, so I think that needs to be consistent across the board, in my opinion.
I'm sorry that I'm late to the party, so I might be repeating stuff, but I'm just intrigued as to who is this in the benefit of? So say we do publish voting records, is this to try and speak to the wider student community in terms of those who don't attend council, for them to hold us to account when they don't attend, or is this for internally for council to have an insight into what different people's views are on it? Because I think that the latter is setting a bit of a dangerous precedent in terms of, yes, we're here as one. I think that the focus needs to be taken off of SABs in terms of we are of course here and we're elected by students to represent students, but also in here we're voting as what we think is best for the student body. So is this to hold everyone to account to the wider students and get people to come to council? Or is this internal? Because I think if it's internal, it's a bit of a precedent to set. Is that a question for Stephen, I think, maybe? Or, I mean, it's your debate, so I was just wondering, like, what would, if it happened, how would you see it run?
Non-way of answering that question, but if
But I mean,
you're
I
going
think
to make a
that's
change.
fundamental part of it is who are we doing it for?
Well, who do you think you're doing
wants to
student
know-
council for? Do you think it's for the people in this room, or do you think it's for the people at wider university?
Well, this one's like who.
well,
where does
if
it
you
come
believe
from?
what's happening in this room is for the people, if for the benefit of the people in this room, then
It's
it's
the
for them.
benefit of the
If you
wa-
think
of
it's for
all
the wider,
students,
if
isn't
you
it?
well, then presumably you might think that your voting record is a subject of interest of theirs. But that's up to you.
Sorry to keep going on, but I think the transparency stuff is really important. I think there's a lot of different ways we can be more transparent, and I think SABs would welcome, I mean, this is a really important debate, but SABs would welcome stuff in terms of what do you want to hear from us, how can we be more transparent with what's going on, and I think that part is a really important aspect as well. But yeah.
I'll take one more point, and then I'm just going to shift the debate slightly. Illustrious.
Can I just suggest, just to follow up on that question, the debate on voting being open versus closed is a well-trodden one over the last 13 years, and depending on the student body, we've moved one way or the other. I suppose the question from you to the councillors is that what the majority of people meant about transparency when they answered that question, or was it, as we started the debate, about promotion of council in general? Because the SABs and the marketing department do lots of stuff to try and
what
promote
SABs
council.
report on as well.
Yeah. So we do a lot of reporting. We've got stats at the yin yang for social media and these things. But is the question that the councillors were answering just about that voting closed or open? Because that might add some clarity to it.
The question on the survey, you might recall, was, do you think that student council is transparent enough in its business? Now that can mean anything. We've just focused on voting, but I was just about to ask, is there anything that the chair can do to increase transparency? For example, we have a lot of reports which just go through all sorts of things. Tobias, I see you smiling.
Yeah, I was going to talk about reports actually, because all SABs do their reports because they're employed and they have to do them, and it's part of their role. But even as us as volunteers, like, we need to do our reports, guys. Like,
I was also thinking, as a suggestion, so
they need to be there.
We do blog posts, actually, just building on your point, and you might not read them, but we do them fairly regularly, once a term. But anyway, they're up there, bit of transparency thing. But what could happen is that, because I'm obviously welfare, but obviously you don't have your own pages, we could have like a section on my blog being like updates from liberation officers on a blog post. I don't know, just to be like, what have I done with the last term?
Yeah, because like, it depends on the person, and obviously people have like circumstances where they can't fulfil that, and that's completely valid. But if the report is there and we're going to get voted on it for a liberation, if we only have to do 2 a year, 2 for a year, like each term, like if possible, like get them submitted. I think this time round there's only 3 people that have three liberation officers that have actually published their reports. Like, so.
Sorry, not to throw.
Elias.
Can I just make one quick point? This is not a proposal, it's just something that I've picked up. There is a serious messaging issue coming out of council because people are not even aware of what we're voting on. I know that there are mechanisms that we're trying to implement, but I'm seeing a lot of people don't even know that we've even discussed the industrial action and what we've been trying to do to mitigate the impact on students. So there is a messaging problem, and how we perhaps make our messaging more attractive, more digestible, like Chris said, more just interactive, and that's very important, and we're weak on that side. So just think about your...
I think in terms of that, we welcome student opinion on that, because I think even as a students' union, which has really high engagement, we really struggle to get messages out, and I think part of it is that the universities send out so many messages, and I think students are just like, this is overload, this is way too much. So I mean, yeah, welcome your, like, any perspectives on that, because I think we do really try and get, we sent an email out about council, but I think it is just one of the many, and I think it's just worth contextualising it in terms of it's not, you know, the main email that goes out. But
Right, these 3 last points, and I'll close the debate. Chris first.
It's a little wacky suggestion to that, but would it be possible if someone got in contact with one of the admins of NewFest or something and said, hey, can we publish on this page, because everyone uses it apparently, can we publish what we do?
I really don't think
Why would
we
you
as
have
the
any
council
issue with
should
that?
ever
Or
associate ourselves with
use
NewFest.
perhaps a separate page, something, a discussion page, anything, despite our own stuff, because that doesn't seem to be working. Anything else?
I think
try
that
and
if you want to post
put
on
the words
NewFest,
out.
you can.
Yeah.
I'm having
Who knows?
Submit a
Who knows
confession
what's
every
gonna
council,
happen?
say come to council.
Who knows
Yeah,
what's
please
gonna
do.
happen?
That's as much.
But hey, you know, if we started actually using these things that the kids are actually using, but so far they are really using us as much as they should be, but they are using, you know,
Christopher, you did
Facebook
it.
a lot.
Do it.
Yeah, well, you know, perhaps we need to get some B-Nox on
You
it.
can
and,
act like
and
we're
sort it out.
legitimising NewFest as a page.
In terms of increasing engagement, despite the fact that freshers and refreshers only happen twice a year, once each, they're really big in terms of getting engagement through not just societies and clubs, but also things such as Go Volunteer and like student media, which aren't necessarily those. Could student council not be represented as part of there and get students from the get-go?
So in every induction lecture that we give to first year students coming in, student council is part of the presentation already.
I was just going to say this might not be the right point for the last point, but also I think students sometimes forget the union and the university is separate as well. So I think kind of alongside what Katie was saying about the messages and the comms going out, they think it's all just the university.
Yeah.
And sometimes there might be like, I don't know, distrust with the university or whatever, and they think that maybe student council therefore isn't the right place for them. I think it's also making that distinction between union and university, and that we are here for the students. But like Katie said, we welcome any sort of feedback just to make either that separation clear or how you want to see your information.
Right, that's going to end the debate for now, as we have some important other stuff to get on to. Jumping back up the order paper now, could I call Katie to make the State of the Union report?
Okay. Hello everyone. So since our last meeting, I did write this a while back, so we'll see what happens. But we finally got round to PABS's Rep Awareness Week. So big thanks to all the reps that were involved in that. We also had Tobias's Proud to Be. Woo woo. Rabs's This Has to Happen. Woo woo. And we're in the midst of what? Oh, sorry. Yes, well done both of you. And Alicia's Black and Blue campaign, which we're currently in the midst of. So I just wanted to shout out to the Liberation officers here and say that you're all doing bits for a variety of extremely important causes and groups. So personal thank you for that, and from the SAB team as well. You're all amazing. You should be really proud of everything that you're doing. Currently, SABs, this is a shorter State of the Union than normal, so I'm trying to drag it on for as long as possible. But SABs are working on a whole range of stuff. Obviously, me and Sarah on the disciplinary procedures. Eleanor and Joe working on grad and AU ball, whoop whoop. And Pablo's currently working on, well, he's actually got dissertation binding. And I'm looking at the cost of graduations, which was a previous motion that I submitted. And Sarah did a really successful student summit, which went really well. And thank you to everyone who contributed to that, because it was really important, really fruitful discussions from it. And I think the university genuinely do appreciate it, to hear it from someone else's mouth other than the SABs for once, which is really nice for you to reiterate everything that we're doing and saying. So thank you all for taking part in that. Obviously, we are nearing the end of this round of industrial action. So just on that, I hope you found NUSU informative. I know it's been really difficult, like we've said, with comms in terms of trying to get stuff out and trying to keep people in the loop. And I think, I just hope that you found the information that we've tried to get out useful, and I know that it's a really difficult time for everyone. But from a SAB perspective, we did lobby for extra counselling sessions to be put on, writing development, maths aid, and increased opening hours for facilities during the strike period. I know that does not in one bit make it any easier or better, but I just wanted to highlight that is something that we did lobby and work for. So I'm sorry about it all, but I hope that sort of tried to help. And then now I sit on university, like post-strike meetings, so I will be lobbying for appropriate forms of compensation for students who have experienced industrial action. So I just note as well that fill in an industrial action impact form, which are open from Monday. If you've been impacted, that's the most appropriate way to go with it. So obviously, in light of the coronavirus, I did just watch Boris and he waffled, so I'm going to waffle on it. So yeah, obviously we were all deeply saddened at the hostility and outright racism that some of our students encountered during that. But I just wanted to shout out to the societies that did an amazing job at doing rallies and standing, in unity with them students. And I think we all came together and will stay together and stand together through what might be quite a difficult time. Yeah, and then I was just going to say, which we have already done, that SABs are also aware that members of council don't feel council is transparent enough. So just to reiterate that any sort of feedback in terms of this State of the Union, or in terms of, general what we can feed back to you, like, please let me know if there's anything in particular that you want to hear about, because this is my opportunity to feed back on that. So yeah, I hope you all have an amazing and chilled out Easter, and that is it. Last thing actually is a save the date for the Friday the 15th of May, which is going to be a sort of SAB thank you. It's not sorted whatsoever, but that is the date that something will occur, and there'll be exciting food and drink options wherever it is and whatever happens. But it's going to be a SAB roundup. It's instead of the summer jam that happened last year. So just look out for that comes, and we'll try and put some exciting events on for you as a big thank you to everyone who takes part in the union. But yeah, if that's it, isn't it?
I'd like to call the rest of the sabbatical officers just to the podium to have questions and mandates. The questions and mandate section is here. You can ask a question on any motion that's come before council, anything at all concerning the sabbatical officers, or indeed the State of the Union, etc. Are there any questions from council? Chris Winter.
Durham University is closing on Monday and toilet roll is flying off the shelves. Does the university have any thoughts on closing, or...?
If you check your email, I think Tobias just had an email from uni. So I think with that, just follow guidance of what the university says. If anything changes, we'll also be sending out our own comms from a union perspective. But I think they've just entered delay phase, which I think Stephen mentioned earlier, but they're not planning on closing anything yet.
Can I just add to that on a societies and clubs point of view? At the moment, we're saying to go ahead with all of your events, especially like local ones. I've had a few questions about concerts and theatre performances and stuff. Our point of view at the moment is just go ahead and do it. Obviously, if you need to put any more precautions in place, maybe sort of advertise, don't come if you've got symptoms, that sort of thing, just to be aware. In terms of trips abroad, we're keeping an eye on it. We say to work and liaise with your travel company and your hotels to see sort of what compensation you get. NUSU as an organisation won't be able to pay out anything if you have to cancel your trip, or individuals cancel. So it's completely up to you and your travel insurance and where you're at on dealing with that. You might be able to get it postponed or something like that. Any questions, just come.
Will this in any way affect the student elections?
Potentially. If they change their mind next week, then I think, but I don't know if Lindsay can give some more information on that.
We were waiting for the government today, obviously, we feel like things could be closed or the knock-on effect, schools were closed, staffing obviously. That hasn't transpired today, but obviously we just monitor it. We have internal meetings every Friday, we will have extra if we need to monitor where trips are going, all that kind of thing. If there was some kind of change between now and we've had that announcement today, we would run student elections electronically. And the things I need to consider is those students, candidates that have spent on visits, for example, we've wasted money, so I have to give them back, so we spend on social media. But at the minute, it just looks business as usual with the elections. We will still have the breakfast and the lunch, but we'll have gloves. We'll just keep it updated, but at the minute, it doesn't look like it'll affect it.
In the back there.
So, about the point on society trips abroad, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but the university at the moment is advising against all but essential travel internationally. Do you not think the union should be taking a similar stance to that and protecting the welfare of students?
I spoke to the registrar on this point just yesterday. So the university have got a lot of things to consider in terms of staff taking students on placements, getting stranded, and having responsibility to get them back. We're very much, until the Vice Chancellor sends out an email and says something else, are business as usual. There are different risk assessments for different trips. All of the clubs and societies have had emails and been told to monitor where they're going and what they're doing, and that will unfold. So there are different risks and there are different problems associated with different kinds of travel.
That was yesterday. This stuff's come out today, this afternoon from the
Okay, well we might have to, like Lindsay said, we've got internal meetings every Friday.
We'll be doing that tomorrow.
We'll have a look at that tomorrow. Thank you for raising that. I think what's really important, sorry,
the difference between our trips and the university, they're the university trips paid for by the university. Our trips, the student trips, are paid for by the students, and it's whether or not they can get their money back. If the government doesn't say you can't go to this country, so I've got a husband myself, so been watching it very closely, you can't get your money back on your insurance, so it's quite different when it's their own student.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
So
but surely it's for safety for students as well. Needs to be considered.
We'll definitely have a re-evaluation.
We'll have to have a look tomorrow.
Regarding this corona outbreak and all this stuff, and regarding international travel advice by the university, if in case the university closed for a month or maybe whatsoever, I mean we don't know yet. For the international students, if can they go back? And regarding the online lectures,
a lot of students are confused about this, that the university is not giving a proper stance of whether they should travel or not.
The university just advised that you should not travel. The thing is, we can't say no, don't travel at all unless we've already traveled there within it. And then as an international student within sort of spring break and all, it's basically
Spring break,
well,
Easter.
sorry, spring break, American year. It's just a matter of checking and keeping up to date. And as of right now, you probably saw that certain flights have been canceled or certain airlines are canceling stuff. I think for anything, it's about personal sort of what you feel is right. If you don't feel safe traveling, then don't travel. You know,
We can't tell
we
people.
can't. We cannot say no and we cannot say anything. And if the university decides that you do have to shut down, in that case, you will. It's basically it's government shut down, and you will not be allowed to travel.
And then you will also receive the relevant information. If the university make that decision, they will give you the relevant information as and when that happens.
follow your. I mean, the best thing to do as well, if you have booked travel and you've got it insured, which you should do if you've booked travel, then I would call up your travel company and see if they've put COVID-19 pages on there, because they're the ones that are going to say we'll refund you because this is a travel ban area, or we won't, so we're carrying on travel. And that's what we're following as a university union, is government policy and insurance policies, etc. So
I think also the international office in the university are probably the perfect people to go to as well. I don't really want to stand up here and give the wrong advice. So the international office over in Kingsgate is probably your best bet if
sort of for like your own like individual questions and stuff. I think that's probably the best.
So just say the university said yesterday they were going to try to make their website page a lot clearer over the next day or two, so you can go to one place for the advice. So the advice yesterday morning was make students aware that if they are travelling to their country for Easter, for example, then they may be they might be able to get there, but if the thing changes as they're expecting to, you might not be able to get back. So you just have to take that into consideration and make your own decision from that, because the information that you've seen has been gradually coming out. So things will change, but some of it they just don't know. But they are going to keep that website up to date with all of the live information. So if you can go to one place to get it, that would be quite handy.
Tobias.
So sorry to follow the trend of coronavirus, but this is more of an education thing, and when it comes to like when you're doing, if you're in third year or if you're doing a master's dissertation and you need lab work, so so Durham has said classes and like lectures and like they're going to be electronic, but if you're working on your own in a lab and you need to get that done for your thesis or something like
specific emails coming out from Chris Day regarding sort of lab and field work students. That's specifically for PGRs and some postgrad taught, but there are still within the whole academic stuff. Suzanne Charlton will be updating.
So they will differentiate what is closed and what's not, and then make our own plans. Cool.
Charlotte.
This is to Karina and Katie. Do you have any updates on how you've been supporting the postgraduate students who've been striking?
Yeah. So do you want me to?
You go, you're postgrad, so.
So he just wants to chip in, that's all.
I can chip in, but you
Yeah, so right now I've been in talks with the PGR UC Youth Committee and sort of talking to them on how best we can represent them in this ongoing discussion. Obviously, as a SAD student, we've decided to be neutral, so we can either for or against say that we're with the strike. So we're in talks and seeing how best we can represent them. I've also brought it up to the policy review group that's coming up to see within the PGR gray area, and recently I just gave a presentation to the EB board and talked about postgrad research and their problems and issues that they're facing. So it's an ongoing discussion and nothing's been necessarily decided right now.
And in the next 2 weeks, which came from, both did a presentation at the executive board. They're very aware there's a lot of grey area, not just in terms of disciplinaries, but in terms of when students are striking and when they're not. So there's going to be a post-grad summit in 2 weeks' time. I haven't put anything out about it because we didn't know what was going on with the coronavirus and I didn't want to waste people's time. So when we know more on Monday, we have set a date and it'll be me, Karina and the Vice-Chancellor. We'll talk for the first bit about disciplinary procedures and issues that postgrads have with whether they're staff or students, HR issues, and then we're going to move on to general grey areas that PGR and PGT students face, and you're all more than welcome to that, but we just haven't put it out there yet because of
the summit that we did the other day as well had PGR representatives on there also discussing the issues directly to executive board, so we are trying to create more of a correspondence channel on a better basis, on a more frequent basis, so that is happening, those conversations are happening.
It's been an ongoing discussion though that I've had with the PGR community as a whole, and I brought it to every meeting that I've sat on, so it's something that's been working on.
Elizabeth.
Have you considered changing your position to be for or against, or are you still firmly neutral?
So we as a union are neutral. There's an article on this online on the NUSU website which I published because I had a lot of questions about it. We decided to be neutral to represent all students, those for, those against, and those neutral. We thought it was the best way to try and represent everyone. If we are mandated by student council to do otherwise and it passes council, then we will follow that guidance, but we are not going to take it upon ourselves to tell students that we are either for or against the strikes. So the strikes, motion that came didn't pass. But if that had passed, we would have of course followed what students mandated us to do. So if there are future strikes, which fingers crossed there aren't, if you want to mandate us either way, then we'll follow what student council tells us to do.
And just say from a PGR perspective, I did post a blog post about the side of postgraduates that are on strike and why you may see some postgraduates go on strike because, once again, they fall in that gray area. So if you want to have a read on that, that's quite important.
Any final questions? Georgia.
What's happening with the policy review and disciplinary changes so far? So I had a policy review group a few weeks ago that was with Lucy Backhouse, our academic registrar, and myself, and a number of students, people who came and shared some amazing, information with us that, we're really happy to see that people are quite open and honest about the policies and procedures that they might have experienced themselves or found just by policy that they weren't really representative students. So that's happened so far. We're planning on having like a final drop-in with people that haven't come yet, mainly to access people that don't really want to communicate in a larger environment with 20 people. They might want to do it on a one-to-one basis, depending on their experiences. This hasn't been organised yet, primarily because it's a really busy period and we don't know what's going on with the coronavirus, but if that does take place, it'll take place a couple of weeks, so I'll share that information, allow people to book drop-ins. Obviously the same with the postgrads, they also have a particular opportunity to share their information. We've had one meeting so far with the university where basically they've put their policies out to the lawyers, Evershed, to have a look at, to make sure that they're legally doing the right thing. Me and Katie have raised some significant issues, some which we acknowledge ourselves, some that students have said, and we want Evershed to review that and see whether we can make those changes legally. We have another meeting on Monday, so once that's happened, we'll update on
I think
where things
we're
are
very
at.
aware that, I think with any first meeting, it's very like, what are the goals of it, what are we going to achieve, and that sort of stuff, and we're very aware that this next one needs to be action-based, and we will report back after that with actual actions that have been changed.
Basically, we are on a schedule for the university to have an updated policy by, all the updated policies by September, so it is quite fast moving. Alongside that, I'm also leading on the policy review internally at the union, and the OFS, Office of Students, which is a government regulator, have produced like a consultation. I would recommend people to read it because you can all individually respond to it as well as student representatives and speak about what you think about their consultation. It's basically saying like their recommendations for new policies. It's also saying some of the sanctions they'll pose on universities once policy guidance has been put through. So I would recommend you read that. If you can't find it, just email me and I can send you the link. But we will be responding to that as a union as well, what we think about what the university's policies are like.
So if
in the
anyone
next
has
couple of weeks.
opinions that they want to come through the union as well, that's more than welcomed. If you don't want to do it individually, I completely get that, so tell us.
But any questions, I'm happy to answer because that is my primary focus for the next few months, and so is Katie's as well. So happy to open to discussions and stuff like that.
One final question from the chair. Following on from last council's ordinary motion 401 on audiovisual accessibility, which I believe was brought forward by Georgia, is there any update or comment on the processes mandated there?
Yeah, so we've had some discussions about it, but at the moment we've not really developed any long-term strategies. I think we're looking a bit at funding for next year, and depending on what funding we get, we can look into more technology and software to make this a bit easier for us to do.
The only thing I would add to that is it's very early stages, but we've been looking at accessibility tools for the NUSU website as well. If you go onto York Student Union website, it's got, I think the company's called Recite. We're looking into that. It's very early because they only emailed me about it like last week. So we're looking into maybe making the website itself more accessible as well. It can play back to you. You can change the colour. You can change the text size. I think it's so cool. It's really cool.
Disability North has the same thing. It's really good.
Yeah. So we're looking into that as well. I know it's not quite the same, but am I right in saying that all the upcoming election videos have got subtitles on? So all the candidates, I don't know if you've seen them on the NUSU website, but all the videos that we produced are subtitled.
Well, thank you very much, guys. Cheers.
Thank you. I'm so sweaty.
Okay, so that brings us on to the officer reports and executive committee minutes. These minutes are deemed approved unless there are any objections to them. I've not received any prior to council. These are the minutes for the Athletic Union Executive Committee, the Society Executive Committee, the Education Executive Committee, the Media Executive Committee, the Halls and Community Executive Committee, Welfare Campaigns and Liberation Exec, Volunteering Executive Committee, and the Senate meeting from 4th March 2020. These are, wow, it is a lot. It's a real mouthful. So they're deemed passed unless there are any objections. No. And then there is the Liberation and Chair Officer reports. These are available on the NUSU website. Don't think they were sent out prior to council. Are they in the reports document? They're in the reports document that was sent out prior to council, which you should have access to, and they are also deemed passed unless there is any. The ones that are submitted. Mine's written, but it's not been submitted because I couldn't log on. I actually. It is a transparency issue, but it will be on my blog, so you can see if I've written it. But yes, it will be on my blog. But yes, they were for. I don't have a list of the ones that were submitted or not. I've just got a list of all the ones that were required. Do you? Yeah, sure.
Well done.
And so they're deemed passed unless there's any objections to the ones that were submitted. No, pass. So that brings us on to the sabbatical officer and end of spring term reports. These reports are also available in the reports document that was sent out. They're also deemed passed unless there are any objections. And so they're passed. And that brings us finally onto the motions section of this evening. We have two motions this evening, one business motion and one ordinary motion. Just as a reminder, business motions are, again, deemed passed unless there are any objections to them. The business motion that has been brought this evening is... Oh, I'm sorry, I've muddled it up. It's we have a constitutional motion, not an Hang on. The headings are slightly... Yes, sorry, yeah, we have a constitutional motion, not an ordinary motion. There are no business motions. The constitutional motion this evening is motion 301 on the disbanding the volunteering executive committee. Just a reminder, constitutional motions take a 2/3 majority, super majority to pass. Sorry, 2/3 majority to pass, and they alter the constitution of NUSU. And so I would like to invite Eleanor Kilner to the podium to make the case for this bill. I have 2 minutes.
So I know this sounds a bit dramatic, but it's not. I'll explain. Basically, volunteering executive committee hasn't actually happened for I think a year now. What happens is the people who sit on volunteering executive committee are elected in the first student council, and only 2 people went forward out of the possible 4 places, I believe. Might have been 4 places. Anyway, there are places still left. And what it does is it kind of duplicates a lot of the work already happening. So if you think about Society's executive committee, they look at primarily grant money, any disciplinary action, and organising society events as well. Within volunteering, they have a grants panel already. So the volunteering exec actually doesn't have the power to grant money, and any disciplinary action, Go Volunteer department is actually probably the biggest department in the student union, and they have structures in place whereby they have volunteer project leaders who the volunteers report to, and then again the line manager. So if any disciplinary issues were going to happen, they would go through those strands. If any action was then deemed to be needed, it would go through another NUSU disciplinary committee. So that is already, those structures are already in place. And lastly, they don't have a grad ball or an AU ball or anything like that. So the event side of it isn't particularly needed. I'll just say on the resolves, just a few changes. So it won't be official until September. The activities officer will take a report from Go Volunteer to council, so like having the minutes uploaded. The Go Volunteer team will do a report to me, well, the activities officer. The activities officer will also sit on the grants panel, so there's a sabbatical officer, student representative on there as well. And I think that might be it. Yeah. Oh, and there will be termly volunteer project lead meetings. At the moment, they kind of meet ad hoc, but this resolve will be that they have to meet every term. Again, the activities officer will be present there, and for the rest of the year, the 2 elected volunteering exec members will be invited to them as well.
Any questions?
Is there anything that should be done by the VEC if it's
taking place that wouldn't be done by anything that's already in place?
No, that's kind of what the structures are already in place, that the volunteering exec doesn't do anything above and beyond what already exists.
Unless there was a grad ball or any sort of events going on.
Sorry.
So you said it's not needed this year because there's no ball going on.
There's never been a ball or any event in Go Volunteer that I'm aware of.
So would this prevent future events from taking place next year?
No, the project leads can put on events. So, for example, Stew Brew do their brewery bashes, and it's just run within their project. A lot of the projects have structures like presidents, secretaries, that sort of thing. So they have the structures in place to put on those events as and when they want. There's nothing stopping them doing that. And actually, they're probably of a smaller size in which an executive wouldn't be needed to organise such event.
Any further questions? No, then I'll sit down. I don't think there's much debate on this one, so I will take one on either side. Would anybody like to speak against the motion? No? Anyone want to make a comment for the motion? Joe?
Makes a lot of sense.
Fantastic. Well, I think we'll proceed to voting then. Are we ready for... If you could have your devices ready, please. Has everyone got their device ready? Is everyone logged in? If there's any problems, please make your way to the front. Please begin voting. What's that? The people have to relog in. Sorry, we're just refreshing the site and we'll commence voting again shortly. If you haven't voted. Will they be asked to vote again? Or? The vote's about to be opened again, so you're just gonna, if you've already voted, just vote again. This is a new vote that's the official one.
Oh wait,
Polling is closed. It's not working.
You're just selling things.
That wasn't right because not everyone voted. What are you doing? Oh well, if it doesn't really care. Oh my god. Mine says polling is closed. Mine says
Yeah, sorry, none of those votes carried. Sorry about that. Just trying to get the system back on now. Please just talk among yourselves.
So.
Going anywhere on holiday? I suppose not.
Put your gloves on. Gloves on. I'm not. I'm coronavirus ready. I'm fuming. I'm trying to.
Really? Right, hang on. Kill it with the music for a second. Kate, you stop the music. Right. So is voting now open? All right, voting is now open. Please have your devices ready. Now music.
I'm so dead. The music keeps going up and down. Oh,
Yay. Woo. Yay. So after this, if you want us to votes, we have to start
I never voted in the entire time because it kicked me out initially, then crapped me out.
It's on your screen now.
The numbers
If you haven't already voted, please could you now do so? Order at the back. If you haven't voted, please can you make sure you have done so now. I believe votes have now been collected. Right, okay.
9%.
Motion carries. Right. Well, that was exciting. So that brings on to our final motion. This is an ordinary motion. Motion 401 is brought by Pablo to stop ascension. Motion on stop ascension bunching. So I'd just like to invite Pablo to. Sorry, yeah, assessment. Sorry. Stuck with votes.
So some of you might be aware that there are students at the university that have more than one deadline the same day. And that for some students is a problem because it's difficult for these students to manage their workloads. So obviously as education officer, I identify this as a problem. There is this document, these two documents at the university called Assessment Tariff and the Assessment Framework that basically establish as a principle for assessments for the university that units should work to ensure that workload is balanced across the academic year and program. And personally, I don't think that having more than one deadline the same day or deadlines very close to each other agrees with that principle. So that's why if we go to resolves, I've come up with this solution, which is basically for me to gather support from council, to go to the university, to ask to basically have no more than 2 assessment deadlines per week, 48 hours between assessment deadlines, and no assessment deadlines 14 days before the dissertation or the final project deadline. Obviously, there are going to be programs like combined honors where this is going to be difficult and sometimes even like impossible to avoid, but I think that the most students that adhere to these rules, the best it will be for them. I mean, I accept any other suggestions that you might have to improve this problem, but this is what I've come up with to solve it. So if anyone has any questions.
One other thing that I would identify that would probably fall into this potentially would be like modules that have only one examination at the end as well, like where they literally have 100% of the module on like one essay, because from a disability perspective that is a nightmare, because the number of students will have like flare-ups or health issues or anything that they can't predict for, and then like 100% lays on such like a small piece of work, do you know what I mean? And then, so yeah, I was just wondering if that would be contained within this, or if that would be a motion that I should submit.
I would need to check because at the moment, so they are the university is doing this whole review about assessments, and I would need to check because my idea is that actually they are moving out from that, so going away from only one assessment. But I would need to double check, and if it's not the case, I'm more than welcome to submit a motion about it.
Oh, wait. Does it take into account the sort of size of this assessment? So in my first year, I'd have 3 pieces of coursework due sort of every 2 weeks, and it was kind of that horrible. But they were quite short pieces of coursework, so relatively, they could sort of be combined for one larger piece of coursework. Is there any distinction between size and number and things like that, and sort of the weight?
So what is currently happening at the university with this review I've just mentioned is that actually they are also getting away from those small pieces of assessment, and they are going more for I think they are going to go for a minimum of 2. Well, they are going to go in the first place for 20 credits module. So they are trying to get away from 10 credits modules. So that's one of the reasons that you might have like much more deadlines and much more assessments. And they are also trying to get away from small pieces. So for example, one assignment that only counts like 5%. So hopefully with that in mind, that with this review of the assessment and with these rules, hopefully students will have a balanced workload across the year, if that makes sense.
In the back there.
Just take into account all like when those deadlines are set and when you can actually do that work, because back in my second year for my bachelor's degree here, I had 5 deadlines in 1 week before January exams, but a lot of that work was set way before Christmas, so we had lots of time to work on it. In fact, most of it was actually an extension because we asked for it. Does that take that into account at all?
Well, I think that's the difficult thing, because at the end of the day, I mean, the experiences of students are very different, in the sense that some like maybe some students, if they have like 4 weeks during Christmas to work towards those 5 assessments, then it will be easy for them to organize their time. But for what I've heard or spoken with other students, people normally organize themselves better when the deadlines are separate. That might not be the case everywhere, and as always with any rule, there needs to be exceptions. Imagine that in one school, students, the students support a lot to have only like 1 deadline for a lot of assessments, then the university should listen to that, because it would be an exception. But this is more of a generic principle to specify a little bit more how to give a balanced workload to students.
Any further questions? Elias.
Just wondering, do these rules apply per module or for the entire course? So if there's 2 assessments due in the same week, what if they are from different modules? Would that still count?
Yeah, so that's what I would like to be this for a degree, so that even if there are 2 assessments from 2 different modules, that they are only 2 per week, and that just to make the lecturers speak to each other, say, oh, you have an assessment this date, all right, I won't put my deadline there because it clashes with yours. A lot of times they forget to do that, and obviously rules are for that. So yeah, it would be for degrees. Obviously, what I've just said, combined honors, joint honors, different options across your modules, you are not always going to get this, obviously, because giving flexibility to students about their options also means that you are not always going to be able to adhere to rules like this. But I think the principle would be to have as most students as possible with no more than 2 assessments per week, with assessments that are no more than 48 hours close, and with no deadlines 14 days before the dissertation or the final project. So it's as many students as possible that can have that, and there is always going to be exceptions, obviously.
Alicia.
What if it's like, because I take modules out of different schools?
Yeah, so that.
Still be the same, even if I'm doing the majority of mine in one school.
So I think that's what I would be speaking about. It would be difficult. Would it be possible? I think that's something that then needs to be there needs to be an exception, because you might not always get a perfect timetable for everybody, especially when you are giving flexibility to students like you that have modules across the university. So that's the gray area. I think this obviously most of the students at the university only have 1 degree and is only in 1 department, so this is easier to adapt for them to adapt to this. Obviously there are going to be exceptions, and obviously it's not going to be always possible, but I think this would be moving in the right direction for doing that.
In the back there.
How can you ensure that this isn't going to make things worse? Because you can say that no 2 deadlines between 48 hours. What if there are 2 deadlines on the same day, and now they're just going to say, oh, we'll just move 2 days forward? It actually makes things worse, because it gives gives you less time to do stuff. Well, and what about courses that have a lot of deadlines? Like, where will they fit them all in if they're not allowed to have them before? And if you're saying to an entire school, like School of Maths, oh, you're the exception, don't follow this. Well, why should any of them follow this if it's only a guidelines and not a rule? Surely the point of implementing is that they actually have to consider around it.
Well, I think the case is that currently there are students with up to 16,000 words to submit in one day, and that's a problem. And I think this is the best solution that I have been able to find to address that. As you can see in the results number 2, I also would be, well, in the 1B, I would be lobbying to monitor and record the assessment deadline dates at the beginning of each semester. It wouldn't be the case that at the middle of the semesters, lecturers are going to find out about it. It would be at the beginning of the semesters, staff having a meeting together, discussing the deadlines, and then adapt it, not to change it in the middle of the semester. So I don't think it would make it worse in a way. I mean, it would be, it's always if the choice of a student, if they want to submit assignments before and all together organize themselves in that way. But I think for a lot of people, having them separated is better.
Any further questions? Patrick.
Do you think it would be worth adding in a provision to deal with deadlines being on the same day as like a site visit?
As what?
As a like field trip?
Yeah. If you want to submit a procedural motion.
Would you like to submit a procedural motion?
You want
Come to the front. Now we were thinking we'd get away early with this one. Do you want to help him write it because you've got to approve it? So is your procedural motion just that you want a motion that there should be no deadlines on the same day as site visits? You accept that? All right. Right. I just want to talk to Angela, get that written down.
Dan, was that you? You took the socks? Where was your fork, mister?
There was I thinking we were going to get away quickly. I thought it was business. I swear when we looked at it in theory it was business. We're going to have quite a short debate on this one because A, we're actually almost running out of time despite the fact that there was nothing at this council. But also oh, I don't know. I think they're just saying it's not going to help them. It's sort of like, yeah, well, I mean, I'm a chair, I have an opinion. Right, that's good.
So it's going to use all the
Get rid of Is that added, man? Oh no. Is it just going to be number 4?
I think
Yeah, cool. Bloody are we ready to go? Right, so that procedural motion is we haven't voted yet, so that's good. So that procedural motion was A4, which is the no assessment on the same day as a visit or field trip. That was accepted by the proposer and the chair, and it's now been added to the motion. We're now going to proceed to a short debate, as I don't sense much opposition in the room, but is there anybody who'd like to speak against the motion? Adam Warner.
I think that this basically restricts people who are normally quite organised with their time, because it's most likely deadlines will be pushed back forward rather, so you'd have less time to do it. And I think a better alternative would just be giving advice and supporting students on how to organise their time. Yeah.
Anyone speak for the motion? Charlotte Peterport. Oh, sorry. You there?
Spit it out. Dramatic in January, I had to write 12,000 words in for 1 week. I had 2 assessments due in on the Monday, 2 more on the Wednesday. Yes, I organised my time quite well, just simply because I knew I would have a mental breakdown if I had to do the equivalent of a dissertation during for 1 week. Yes, you have time of a Christmas example, but I would like to spend time with my family and not just do assessments. I think this is really good for people's mental health. It's extremely stressful to know you have 2 deadlines on the same day, especially if they're in for the same time. But for example, one of them's a physical hand in, one isn't. You're kind of flapping about, making sure you get everything in. I think this would be great, and although I'm sure there would be difficulties implementing it, I know how disparate schools can be. I think it would be good and really just help people's mental health when doing their assessments. Yeah. Well, eat my pizza.
Anyone against the motion? In the back there.
I think it's worth pointing out that this new amendment doesn't work for all courses. If you go on a field trip for, like my course went on field trips for like a week and a half, you've got deadlines when you're away. There are assessments, that doesn't work. You're saying you can't have any assessments whilst you're on those field trips. Also, I think I agree with gentlemen over here that university's about training you for adult life, about you have to balance your workload. If assessment deadlines should be moved forwards, then you're getting less time to do the work. So yeah.
Pablo.
Related to the first point, I think that actually having field trips is at the same time you have assessment deadlines is very bad in terms of the organization of the school, and it's a reflection on them, because if you want to include the students in all of their events, you shouldn't be putting deadlines at the same time. Students will be working towards those deadlines at the same time. Yes, you could organize yourself, but I think as a principal you shouldn't be doing that. It's just you are not going to get the same engagement with those activities. And then in relation with the second point about the adult life, I think that having irrational points at the university where the staff tells you, oh, that will build your resilience, that will make you fit for the adult life, I think that's very dismissive, because a lot of people can just not cope with having 16,000 words in one day. And I think it's very good if students can organize themselves, if some students can organize themselves to have 16,000 words in one day, but
obviously for a lot of students, it's going to be very difficult to organize that and building that time management. Also, I don't think that in model life, you're going to have you're going to have 4,000 words for one report, another 4,000 words for another report, and then 10,000 words for another thing. That's not how it works. And you could, I mean, at least I don't know anyone that is working around my life and that happens that it works. So I think this is moving in a more rational way for students.
Anyone speak against the motion? Adam Warner.
So I think one way to resolve this is you could just have soft deadlines. So you'd still have deadlines as said, but they'd just be advisory from the lecturer. So you'd get that support and advice then. If we were to have these new hard deadlines, this is when it would be. But if you have a bad day or something goes wrong and you can't get pegged for it, you can still have this time to plan. And that way, those that struggle with time management are getting more support to manage their time, but those are really quite good at it aren't penalised because they aren't further restricted, which is what this motion would probably do to them.
Anyone speak for the motion? Joe Gibbons.
It was more kind of a point of information.
Oh, okay.
Apologies if I got this wrong, but what I think Tim meant when he was talking about the fieldwork deadlines was like a deadline that's set as part of the field trip. So say you're away for a week and there's a bit of work as part of that week. So it might just be a wording issue rather than an actual issue with the motion. Is that what you meant?
What I was meaning by that.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, because with Earth Science they have trips to like say an island
Other
and then they do
module,
work
like
within that
Yeah,
week.
I mean, I think in response to that, obviously that would be an exception, and that would, you cannot make this for everything. You're always going to have different situations. That would be reasonable to have a deadline with the field trip if it's part of the field.
So should we change that to no assessments on the same day as site visits or field trips, other than work specifically relating to the site visit / field trip? Does that make sense?
Can Rabs also say she wants to do amendment as well? So just while we're at it, maybe say it before he does that because it might be easier.
So would this also encompass like exams? Because I've had situations where I've had an exam in the morning until 1 p.m. and then at 1 p.m. I also have something due. So no. Okay, great. No.
Would you be happy with that, perhaps?
Because I think you're all aware of what the amendment will be. Where were we? Would someone like to speak for the motion? You just had your hand up for the whole time. Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify that this motion would not prevent students who have loads of time to prepare their work from submitting it on time, but I'm coming from a school that was expecting students to submit their dissertation, which is 10,000 words, together with 2 to 3 other assessments, which are essays. And you would have to consider the fact that some students are carers, some students have to work in order to support their education, and you know, other students might just be in poor health or whatever. Obviously with coronavirus people are not travelling as much, but you would have to take into consideration the fact that while I myself can use my Easter break as a time to write my assessments and also work on my dissertation, I am in a very privileged position that not a lot of students are in. So it's not preventing students from doing their work on time, it's just allowing those who do not have the same circumstances to perform at the same level as the rest.
Yes.
And to speak against the motion, I'm going to take a couple more points. Adam Warner, again.
If you want to, you can hand it in advance before the deadline. So having a more restrictive deadline, I don't think gains you any more time. If you want to start having hangover, you just hand it in, and that's why something like advisory deadlines would do well, but not being the actual ones, because then you can just manage your time. Then it in no way detracts from your time. But if this motion were to go through, you'd be more restricted.
And to speak for the motion. Elias.
So I've been school rep this year and I've been getting a lot of feedback from students. Essentially, they're getting poor feedback when they submit those assignments that they've been working on for weeks and weeks and weeks. The reason they're getting poor feedback is because lecturers are not only having to deal with many thousands of words, but they're dealing with many thousands of words across a number of assignments. So they have to rush their marking. You know, we're being told 10 minutes per assignment. Students that are involved with strike action, one of the reasons that they are striking is because they can't deal with the workload. So getting that spread doesn't only help the student in regards to their mental health, etc., but it also helps the lecturers to get that workload under control. And I suppose because they have a 3-week deadline, as far as I know, to give that feedback, and that means better quality feedback for students, so that next time around they know how to improve, because we have a lot of students get their feedback and they just don't know what went wrong.
Right, we're going to move on to... is voting ready? We're going to move on to voting now. So if you could have your devices ready, make sure you're still logged in. If you've timed out... Not yet. If you've timed out whatever, please come to the front. Are we ready to vote? Okay, voting should be live now. Thank you. Oh. How many? There's 2 in there. Motion carries. So that's passed. That brings us to the end of the motion section of this evening, and we only have our student notices, and then it's the raffle. So does any student have a notice they'd like to put to council? Any notices to council? Amelia. Chris.
Hello, Chris Russo, Faithful Belief. It's Discover Islam Week. Yeah, I know, right? Discover Islam Week soon, coming up, very exciting. Known, the Christian Unions event seemed to have gone quite well. Just another update, the Holy Fathers, in all of their wisdom, have decided that the Eucharist cannot pass along the coronavirus. So if you do wish to take Eucharist, it's totally fine. Other than that, yeah, so that's all the motions I've got. Or notices, sorry. Notices.
All right.
Just to say buy raffle tickets for the refund. 13th of June.
The Jazz Orchestra Society, aka NUSU, are hosting a jazz jam tonight at Bar Loco.
I'm going.
We're
going. Saz will be there.
It'll be on till late, so even if you want to go for a drink in Bluefords first and then head over there, it'll still
No, we'll
be
go
on.
straight to Bar Loco, mate.
I'm getting out of here.
Molly.
Film Talks Film Festival is on this weekend from 10 on Saturday to... well, it starts on 10 on Saturday, and on Sunday it starts at 12. That'll be really good, lots of student-made films, and there's people coming from other universities, and it should be really fun, so...
in the front.
Pakistani Society is hosting a ball on 25th of March, so if anyone of you wants to experience the culture of Pakistan and non-Islam, it's not going to be like, there's not going to be any language barrier. It's going to be hosted in English, of course. But then it's going to be like, experience the culture and stuff, so everyone's just welcome, and the tickets are right on NUSU, Parks on page. Thank you.
Wait, what society was that?
Pakistan Society.
Elizabeth?
So, just a couple of notifications from the People on Planet Society. Tomorrow, there will be another climate strike. I believe we're meeting in front of the SU if anyone wants to attend. Also, looking ahead a bit, on Saturday the 21st, we'll be hosting a workshop about the relationship between climate change and colonialism. It's on Facebook if you look up People on Planet Newcastle, and if you're interested in going, I would like to ask if you could please tell us on Facebook that you're interested or going, so we know how many people to expect.
Brad?
So after this has to happen, when off to such good success, I want to remind everyone that we have our holy event this Sunday. It's going to be a big water fight. Hopefully it won't rain. Oh, that might help. You get your shirt, color throwing, powder, big fun. Buy your tickets on the SU website, and yeet.
Following on from all rag things, me and about 16 other people are running the Great North Run this year for Anti-Slavery International, done through rag. I haven't set up a GoFundMe page. There is no information about it anywhere currently, but there might be, so I'll be bickering. Well, yeah, annoying you all about it.
Last one. Oh, last 2 miles.
The NUSU election debates are carrying on tomorrow with the presidential one. If you want.
Yeah, boy. That's exciting. Or you could watch the past ones on YouTube.
Yeah, and Georgia.
Last night's It Happens Here is running an art exhibition in May about victim blaming and sexual violence. If anybody wants to get involved, we're having an open call for artists and performers. So yeah.
Okay.
And also keep an eye on Facebook.
Okay, so our first raffle winner this evening is ticket 552.
Oh my gosh! Oh,
It's fixed.
No, pass it on.
It's going to be gross to get. Very lucky winner.
Transparency.
And the second and final ticket winner is ticket 564.
Oh, what?
Ticket 564. Oh, it's truly fixed. Are you sure? Oh, okay. Sure, just. Hang on. Ticket 527.
Oh, come on!
So, just a quick reminder, could you all please just clean up all of your rubbish? It would be a big, big help. And that's all, folks. That's the end of this council. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen.